Life in the quaint suburban neighborhood of Maplewood had always seemed idyllic. Rows of neat houses with perfectly manicured lawns, children playing in the streets, and friendly neighbors who waved at each other every morning. This was the backdrop of my life for the past 15 years. My name is John, and I'm a 45-year-old software engineer. My wife, Lisa, is 42 and works as a freelance graphic designer. We don't have children, which allowed us to focus on our careers and each other. Our home was a modest but comfortable two-story house, filled with love and laughter, or so I thought. Maplewood was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, where the local diner's owner greeted you by name, and the mailman knew the names of your pets. We had our circle of friends, weekend barbecues, and holiday gatherings that were the envy of anyone looking for a picture-perfect life. Lisa and I were high school sweethearts, and our bond seemed unbreakable. We shared everything, or so I believed, from dreams and fears to the daily minutiae of our lives. Our marriage wasn't perfect, no marriage is, but it was solid. We had our arguments, our ups and downs, but we always found a way to come back to each other. Lisa was the love of my life, my partner, and my best friend. That's why it was so devastating when I started noticing changes in her behavior that hinted at something sinister lurking beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect life. Maplewood, with all its charm and familiarity, became a place of tension and suspicion. I tried to push the nagging doubts away, convincing myself that I was overreacting. Lisa had always been faithful and loving. She wouldn't betray me. Yet the signs were there, gnawing at the edges of my mind, refusing to be ignored. As the days turned into weeks, my suspicions grew. I started paying closer attention to Lisa's behavior, looking for any clues that could either confirm or dispel my fears. Little did I know that my life was about to be turned upside down, and the love and trust I had built my life around would be shattered in the most devastating way. The changes in Lisa's behavior became more pronounced as summer turned to autumn. She was always meticulous about her appearance, but now she spent even more time getting ready before heading out, even on supposedly casual outings. Her laughter, once so familiar and comforting, seemed strained, almost forced, whenever we were together. The intimacy we shared began to wane, replaced by a growing emotional distance that left me feeling like a stranger in my own home. One evening, I found myself alone in the living room, a glass of whiskey in hand, replaying the past few months in my mind. I tried to recall the exact moment when things started to feel different. It wasn't just the late nights or the secretive phone calls. It was the way Lisa looked at me, or rather, the way she avoided looking at me. Her eyes, once filled with warmth and love, now seemed distant, as if she was miles away, even when she was right next to me. I decided to confront her about the long hours she was putting in. "Lisa, are you sure you're not overworking yourself? You've been staying late a lot recently," I said one evening over dinner. She barely glanced up from her plate, her fork pausing mid-air. "It's just a busy period, John. You know how it is with freelance work. Sometimes clients have tight deadlines." Her explanation was plausible, but it didn't ease my unease. There was something in her tone, a hint of irritation that hadn't been there before, as if my question was an unwelcome intrusion rather than a genuine concern. I nodded, trying to mask my worry, but my suspicions only grew. The turning point came a few weeks later. I was in the garage, organizing some old tools, when I stumbled upon a small, gift-wrapped box hidden in one of Lisa's storage bins. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it to find a delicate gold bracelet, something I knew she would love. But it wasn't the bracelet that caught my attention. It was the note tucked inside. "Can't wait to see you again. M." My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at the note, the realization hitting me like a punch to the gut. Who was M? Why was he giving my wife gifts? The bracelet was something intimate, not a casual gift from a friend or colleague. It spoke of a deeper connection, a relationship that went beyond professional or platonic boundaries. I decided to keep the discovery to myself, hoping to find more evidence before confronting Lisa. Over the next few days, I noticed more subtle signs. She had a newfound fondness for a particular perfume, one she never used before. She would smile at her phone, a private smile that was never directed at me anymore. She started leaving the house without telling me where she was going, claiming she needed some me time. One Saturday afternoon, while Lisa was out running errands, I took the opportunity to check her phone. It was a desperate move, something I never thought I'd do. My hands trembled as I unlocked it, feeling like a trespasser in my own marriage. Her messages were mostly mundane, but then I found a conversation with someone saved under the name Michelle. The messages were brief, but flirtatious, filled with inside jokes and innuendos that sent a chill down my spine. One message in particular stood out. "Last night was amazing. I can't wait for our next rendezvous. Rendezvous." The word echoed in my mind, confirming my worst fears. Lisa was having an affair. The realization was like a dagger to the heart, each message I read twisting the blade deeper. I felt a wave of anger, hurt, and betrayal crash over me, leaving me breathless. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted more than anyone, was cheating on me. When Lisa returned home that evening, I tried to act normal, but the facade was crumbling. I watched her closely, every smile, every gesture now tainted by the knowledge of her betrayal. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but I knew I needed to be sure, to have undeniable proof before I made my move. In the following days, I began to notice even more signs. Lisa was increasingly absent-minded, forgetting small things like her keys or what day it was. She was always checking her phone, her eyes lighting up with every notification. I felt like I was living with a stranger, a woman who bore the likeness of my wife, but whose heart belonged to someone else. The walls of our home, once a sanctuary of love and trust, now felt like a prison of deceit and lies. I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I needed to know the extent of her betrayal, to understand how our life together had unraveled so completely without me realizing it. And so, with a heavy heart and a growing sense of dread, I prepared myself for the next step: discovery. The tension in our house reached a boiling point as autumn settled into winter. Lisa's late nights became more frequent, and her absences more suspicious. I felt like I was living on the edge of a precipice, teetering between denial and the painful truth. The bracelet, the messages, the late nights, everything pointed to the undeniable fact that she was cheating on me. But I needed concrete evidence, something I could confront her with, something that would erase any lingering doubts. One night, Lisa announced she was heading out to meet some friends for dinner. Her tone was casual, but there was an edge to it that set my nerves on fire. I nodded, pretending to believe her, and waited for her to leave. As soon as she was out the door, I grabbed my coat and followed her. She drove to the outskirts of town, to a secluded spot near the old abandoned mill, a place that teenagers used to hang out. My heart pounded as I parked my car at a distance, hidden behind some trees. I watched as she parked and turned off her headlights. Moments later, another car pulled up beside hers. A man got out and slipped into her car. I couldn't see much through the darkness, but the shadows inside the car told me everything I needed to know. My mind raced with images of what they were doing, each one more painful than the last. The realization that she had brought him here, to our town, to a place we knew, added a layer of betrayal that felt like a physical blow. I clenched my fists, trying to control the rage boiling inside me. But then I saw it, a movement that shattered any last hope I had. They were kissing, passionately, and then more. Lisa's head tilted back, her face lit by the faint glow of the dashboard, a look of pleasure that I hadn't seen in years. She was fucking him right there, in the car we had bought together, where we had shared so many memories. Something snapped inside me. I couldn't just stand there and watch. I had to do something, anything, to stop this madness. I got out of my car and approached them, my footsteps silent on the gravel. As I got closer, the sounds of their intimacy grew louder, each moan a knife to my heart. Without thinking, I yanked the car door open. The sudden intrusion startled them both. Lisa's eyes widened in horror as she saw me, and the man, her lover, tried to scramble away. But I was faster. I grabbed him by the collar and pulled him out of the car, throwing him to the ground. "What the fuck do you think you're doing?" I roared, my voice echoing in the still night. The man, a tall, muscular figure, tried to get up, but I kicked him in the stomach, knocking the wind out of him. Lisa screamed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound that only fueled my anger. "John, stop! Please stop!" she cried, but I couldn't hear her over the blood pounding in my ears. The man tried to fight back, but I was relentless. Every punch, every kick, was fueled by months of suspicion, anger, and heartbreak. I could see the fear in his eyes, a look of desperation as he tried to shield himself from my blows. "Who the fuck are you?" I shouted, grabbing him by the collar again and lifting him to his feet. "What are you doing with my wife?" He mumbled something, a weak attempt at an apology or an explanation, but I didn't care. I threw him back to the ground, my fists aching from the impact. "John, please! Stop! You're going to kill him!" Lisa's voice cut through the haze of my rage. I turned to her, seeing the tears streaming down her face, her clothes disheveled, the reality of her betrayal stark and undeniable. "You!" I pointed at her, my voice trembling with fury. "How could you do this? How could you betray me like this?" Lisa sobbed, her hands covering her face. "John, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen." "Didn't mean for this to happen?" I echoed, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You're fucking him in our car, Lisa. How does that just happen?" The man groaned, trying to get up again. I kicked him once more, making sure he stayed down. "Get the hell out of here," I growled, my voice low and dangerous. "If I ever see you near her again, I will kill you." He nodded frantically, scrambling to his feet and stumbling back to his car. He drove off, tires screeching on the gravel, leaving Lisa and me alone in the suffocating silence. I turned back to Lisa, my chest heaving with rage and betrayal. "How long?" I demanded. "How long has this been going on?" She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. "A few months," she whispered. "It didn't mean anything, John. I was lonely and he was just there." "Just there," I repeated, shaking my head in disbelief. "You destroyed our marriage for someone who was just there." She tried to reach out to me, but I stepped back, avoiding her touch. "Don't," I said coldly. "You've done enough." The reality of what had happened hit me like a ton of bricks. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted, had betrayed me in the most intimate way possible. The life we had built together was crumbling around us, and there was no going back. "Get in the car," I said, my voice flat and emotionless. "We're going home." Lisa nodded, her shoulders slumped in defeat. She climbed into the passenger seat, and I got behind the wheel, my mind racing with thoughts of revenge and retribution. The drive home was silent, the weight of what had happened hanging heavily between us. I knew that this was just the beginning. The confrontation was far from over, and the road ahead would be filled with pain, anger, and heartbreak. But one thing was certain. I would not let this betrayal go unanswered. In the days following the discovery, my life turned into a dark spiral of rage and determination. Confronting Lisa had only fueled my desire for revenge. I couldn't let her betrayal go unanswered. She had shattered our marriage, and I was going to make sure she paid for it. Lisa tried to mend things, to apologize and explain herself, but I couldn't hear any of it. Her words were empty, her promises meaningless. The anger inside me demanded action, something more tangible than words. I wanted her to feel the same pain she had inflicted on me. My first step was to gather all the evidence I could find. I went through her phone, her emails, and even her social media accounts. I found more messages, more photos, each one a stab to my already bleeding heart. But these weren't just wounds. They were weapons, tools I could use to bring her down. I started with her work. Lisa's freelance career was something she took great pride in. She had built a reputation, a client base, and a portfolio that she often flaunted. I knew that exposing her infidelity could ruin that. I compiled all the evidence and sent it anonymously to her top clients, framing it as a concerned friend who thought they should know the kind of person they were working with. The fallout was immediate. Within days, Lisa lost several key clients. Her reputation was tarnished, her professional life in shambles. She came home one evening, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. She tried to confront me, but I pretended to be clueless, feigning concern and sympathy. "I'm so sorry, Lisa," I said, my voice dripping with false sincerity. "I can't believe people would do this to you." She looked at me, searching for any hint of deception, but I had perfected my act. She had no idea it was me behind her downfall. Next, I turned my attention to her social circle. Lisa had a group of friends who were fiercely loyal, always by her side through thick and thin. But loyalty has its limits, and I was determined to test theirs. I sent the evidence to her closest friends, making sure they knew about her affair, about the lies she had been living. The responses were mixed. Some friends distanced themselves, shocked and disappointed by her actions. Others confronted her, demanding explanations and apologies. Lisa was left isolated, her support network crumbling around her. But I wasn't done yet. I needed to hit her where it hurt the most. Her lover. The man she had cheated with was a local businessman, well known in our community. I decided to ruin his life as well. Using the evidence I had gathered, I contacted his wife, sending her everything. The betrayal on her end was as devastating as it was on mine. She filed for divorce immediately, and his personal and professional life fell apart. Word spread quickly in our small town. The scandal became the talk of Maplewood, whispers and gossip spreading like wildfire. Lisa couldn't step outside without feeling the weight of judgmental eyes on her. Her shame was palpable, and I reveled in it. Despite the chaos, Lisa tried to hold on, to salvage what was left of her life. She tried to make amends, to repair our marriage, but I had no interest in reconciliation. I was consumed by my need for revenge, my desire to see her suffer. The final blow came when I filed for divorce. I had prepared meticulously, ensuring I had all the evidence needed to get the upper hand. I demanded everything, our house, our savings, everything we had built together. I wanted to leave her with nothing. Lisa was devastated. She begged and pleaded, but my heart had turned to stone. I watched her crumble, her spirit breaking under the weight of her own actions. It was a hollow victory, but a victory nonetheless. As the divorce proceedings dragged on, I maintained my cold, calculated demeanor. Lisa's once confident and vibrant persona had faded into a shadow of its former self. She was broken, and I had made sure of it. In the end, I got everything I wanted: the house, the money, and the satisfaction of knowing I had exacted my revenge. Lisa was left with nothing but the remnants of a life she had destroyed with her own hands. The man she had betrayed me with had lost everything as well: his family, his reputation, and his standing in the community. But as I stood in the empty house we had once called home, a new realization began to creep in. My revenge had consumed me, but it hadn't healed the wounds. The anger and betrayal were still there, festering beneath the surface. I had destroyed Lisa's life, but in doing so, I had also destroyed a part of myself. The path to revenge had been dark and twisted, and it left me standing in the ruins of a life I no longer recognized. I had won, but at what cost? The journey ahead was uncertain, filled with the remnants of a shattered marriage and a heart still heavy with pain. But for now, I had my revenge, and that would have to be enough. The house felt eerily quiet in the days following the finalization of our divorce. The once cozy home we shared was now just a shell, its walls echoing with memories of a life that no longer existed. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, each step a reminder of the love and trust that had been shattered. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the living room, Lisa knocked on the door. I opened it to find her standing there, looking fragile and worn. She had clearly been crying, her eyes red and puffy, her hair disheveled. She looked like a woman who had lost everything, and in many ways she had. "John, can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, stepping aside to let her in. We sat down in the living room, the silence between us heavy and uncomfortable. I waited for her to speak, knowing that whatever she had to say would be the last time we truly communicated. "I know I've said this before, but I'm so sorry for everything," Lisa began, her voice trembling. "I know I hurt you in ways that can never be undone. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, and I've lost everything because of them." I remained silent, my expression unreadable. I had heard her apologies before, but they had always rung hollow. This time, though, there was a desperation in her voice that was hard to ignore. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," she continued, her eyes fixed on the floor. "About why I did what I did. I was lonely, yes, but that's not an excuse. I took our life, our love, and I threw it away for something that meant nothing. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know that I am truly sorry." Her words hung in the air, and for the first time, I felt a twinge of pity for her. She had lost so much, and the weight of her actions had finally caught up with her. But pity wasn't enough to bridge the chasm that had opened between us. "I appreciate your apology, Lisa," I said, my voice steady. "But sorry doesn't change what you did. You didn't just betray me, you destroyed our life together. You made choices that can't be undone." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know, and I'm willing to accept the consequences of those choices. I just wish things could have been different. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in what felt like forever. The woman sitting before me was a stranger, a ghost of the person I had once loved. The realization that we were truly done, that there was no going back, hit me with a finality that was both liberating and heartbreaking. We can't change the past, Lisa, I said softly. All we can do is move forward. I hope you find peace, but I can't be a part of your life anymore. Too much has happened. Too much has been lost. She nodded again, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I understand, John. I really do. I hope someday you can find it in your heart to forgive me, even if we can never be together again. I stood up, signaling the end of our conversation. Goodbye, Lisa. I hope you find what you're looking for. She stood as well, wiping her tears and looking at me one last time. Goodbye, John. Thank you for everything, despite how it ended. With that, she turned and walked out of the house, leaving me standing alone in the empty living room. The finality of her departure settled over me like a shroud, but there was also a sense of relief. The chapter of my life that had been filled with betrayal and heartache was finally closed. As I watched her walk down the path and disappear from view, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger and pain were still there, but so was a glimmer of hope. Hope that someday I could move on from this, that I could rebuild my life without the shadow of Lisa's betrayal hanging over me. The house was mine now, and with it came the opportunity to start fresh, to create new memories, to find happiness again. The road ahead would be long and challenging, but for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of optimism. Lisa's last words echoed in my mind as I stood there, looking out into the night. I hope someday you can find it in your heart to forgive me. Forgiveness was a long way off, but at least now I could begin the journey toward healing, and that was a start. Months passed since the finalization of our divorce, and life slowly began to take on a new rhythm. The house, once filled with memories of love and betrayal, was transformed into a sanctuary of solitude and self-discovery. I had repainted the walls, rearranged the furniture, and even taken up gardening, something I never had time for before. Each change was a step toward reclaiming my life and creating a space that was truly mine. The days were filled with work and new routines. I threw myself into my job, taking on new projects and responsibilities. The distraction was welcome, a way to keep my mind from wandering back to the painful memories of the past year. My colleagues noticed the change in me, more focused, more determined. I was building a new professional reputation, one that wasn't overshadowed by personal turmoil. Weekends were spent exploring hobbies and interests I had long neglected. I joined a hiking group, rediscovering the joy of nature and the peace it brought. The physical exertion was a balm for my restless mind, and the camaraderie of the group provided a sense of belonging. I even started taking photography classes, capturing the beauty of the world through a lens, finding new perspectives and appreciating the small details of life. Socially, I began to reconnect with old friends and make new ones. The first few outings were awkward, filled with well-meaning questions about Lisa and the divorce. But as time passed, the curiosity waned, and I was able to share more of myself without the shadow of my failed marriage looming over every conversation. Dinners, game nights, and casual hangouts became a regular part of my life again, reminding me of the importance of human connection. One sunny afternoon, while hiking with the group, I met Sarah. She was new to town, having moved for a job opportunity. We struck up a conversation, and I was immediately drawn to her easy smile and genuine curiosity about the world. We talked about everything from favorite hiking trails to our shared love of photography. There was no rush, no pressure, just two people enjoying each other's company. Our friendship grew naturally, built on shared interests and mutual respect. We started meeting outside the hiking group, exploring the town's cafes and attending local art exhibits. Sarah had a calming presence, a gentle understanding that made me feel at ease. She never pried into my past, but she was there to listen when I chose to share. With her, I felt a sense of normalcy returning, a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a future beyond the pain. As winter turned to spring, My relationship with Sarah deepened. We spent more time together, our conversations becoming more personal and meaningful. She shared her own stories of heartbreak and resilience, and we found strength in our shared experiences. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, but a steady, comforting connection that felt right. One evening, after a particularly long hike, we sat on a hill overlooking the town. The sunset painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, and I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in a long time. "John, I feel like we've both come a long way," Sarah said, her voice soft. "I know it's been hard, but I'm glad we found each other in the midst of it all." I looked at her, grateful for her presence in my life. "Me too, Sarah. You've helped me see that there's more to life than what I lost. There's so much more to discover, and I'm glad we're doing it together." We sat there in comfortable silence, watching the sun dip below the horizon, signaling the end of one day and the promise of another. In that moment, I realized that healing wasn't a destination but a journey, and with Sarah by my side, I felt ready to embrace whatever the future held. Reflecting on the past year, I saw how far I had come. The betrayal and anger had once consumed me, but now they were just parts of my story, chapters that had shaped me but did not define me. I had learned to value myself, to recognize my worth, and to build a life that was fulfilling and meaningful. Forgiveness, I discovered, was not about absolving Lisa of her actions, but about freeing myself from the hold those actions had over me. It was about letting go of the bitterness and finding the strength to move forward. And in doing so, I found a sense of peace. Life was no longer the simple, predictable path I once envisioned, but it was rich with possibility and hope. The journey of betrayal, revenge, and healing had led me to a place of new beginnings, and I was ready to embrace it all. As I stood on that hill with Sarah, I knew that the future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I was okay with that. I was ready to face whatever came next, knowing that I had the strength and resilience to handle it. And with each new day, I was reminded that even in the wake of the deepest betrayal, there is always the potential for new life, new love, and new hope.